Ladies and gentlemen, gather round as I spin you a yarn about a lad from the quaint town of Shirebrook, Derbyshire, who punched, kicked, and occasionally dove his way into Hollywood stardom. Yes, I'm talking about none other than Jason Statham. Now, picture this, a young Jason, born on July 26, 1967, to Eileen, a dancer, and Barry, a street vendor with a penchant for singing. With such a mix, you'd expect the boy to either dance his way through life or sell you a watch while serenading you. But young Jason had other plans. Growing up in Great Yarmouth, he was surrounded by the hustle and bustle of market stalls. While his father was busy convincing folks they needed yet another trinket, Jason was developing a love for martial arts. Perhaps he figured that if anyone tried to haggle too hard, a swift karate chop would settle the deal. But martial arts weren't his only passion. Oh no, our Jason had a thing for diving. Not the kind you do off the couch into a pile of laundry, but the Olympic kind. He trained rigorously and became a member of Britain's national diving squad, representing England in the 1990 Commonwealth Games. Imagine that, from market stalls to diving boards. Quite the leap, wouldn't you say? Now, while he was making a splash in the diving world, fate had other plans. During training sessions at London's Crystal Palace National Sports Centre, a talent agent spotted him. Perhaps it was the way he gracefully belly-flopped into the pool that caught their eye. Soon after, he found himself modeling for brands like Tommy Hilfiger and Levi's. From selling goods on the street to strutting down the runway, Jason was proving to be quite the chameleon. But here's the kicker. Despite the glitz and glam of modeling, Jason hadn't completely left his street-selling days behind. To make ends meet, he dabbled in selling fake perfume and jewelry on street corners. One can only imagine the sales pitch. Smells just like the real thing. And if you don't believe me, well, I do my own stunts. Speaking of stunts, it was around this time that Jason's path crossed with director Guy Ritchie. Ritchie was on the hunt for someone authentic, someone who knew the ins and outs of street life for his film Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels. Enter Jason, with his real-life experience of persuading unsuspecting pedestrians to buy knockoff goods. He nailed the audition, probably by trying to sell Ritchie a genuine Rolex, and the rest, as they say, is history. The film was a hit, and Jason's portrayal of Bacon opened doors faster than a locksmith on a caffeine high. He reunited with Ritchie for Snatch in 2000, sharing screen space with Brad Pitt. Not too shabby for a former street vendor. But Jason wasn't one to rest on his laurels. He took on roles in films like the one alongside Jet Li and Ghosts of Mars. However, it was 2002's The Transporter that solidified his status as an action star. Playing Frank Martin, a no-nonsense driver with a strict set of rules, Jason performed his own stunts, bringing authenticity to the role. And let's be honest, who wouldn't want to watch a guy in a suit beat up bad guys and then drive away in a sleek car? The success of The Transporter led to sequels, and Jason became the go-to guy for high-octane action films. From Crank to The Mechanic, he carved a niche for himself as the brooding, tough-as-nails protagonist who, despite being shot at, blown up, and chased, always managed to keep his stubble impeccably trimmed. In 2010, he joined the ensemble cast of The Expendables, rubbing shoulders with action legends like Sylvester Stallone and Arnold Schwarzenegger. It was like an action hero convention, and Jason fit right in. Not one to be typecast, he showcased his comedic chops in 2015's Spy, proving that he could make audiences laugh just as easily as he could make them wince with his intense fight scenes. Off-screen, Jason's life has been just as eventful. He began dating model Rosie Huntington-Whiteley in 2010, and the couple got engaged in 2016. Macola, June 4, 2025, 11:31. They welcomed their first child, a son named Jack Oscar, in June 2017, and their daughter, Isabella James, in February 2022. One can only hope that the kids inherit their father's knack for diving and their mother's runway skills. From the bustling markets of Great Yarmouth to the glitzy streets of Hollywood, Jason Statham's journey has been anything but ordinary. He's a testament to the idea that with a bit of grit, determination, and perhaps a well-timed roundhouse kick, you can go from selling fake jewelry to becoming one of the most recognizable action stars in the world. Cheers to you, Jason, for keeping us entertained and reminding us that sometimes, life's best roles are the ones you never saw coming. All right, class, settle in now. Where were we? Yes, Jason had just become Hollywood's go-to-Hardman, the guy who could deliver a one-liner right after drop-kicking someone through a window. But believe me, it wasn't all car chases and roundhouse kicks. No. There were bumps in the road, unexpected turns, and more than a few near misses that could have easily steered our Jason right off course. Let's rewind to the mid-2000s, when Jason's career was picking up steam faster than a turbocharged Audi. By now, he'd become synonymous with grit and precision. Directors wanted him. Studios courted him. And fans couldn't get enough of the scowling Brit who barely broke a sweat while dismantling entire squads of villains. But here's the thing about success. It doesn't come with a user manual. For a guy who'd once sold fake perfume on the street, suddenly being asked to attend red carpet galas and sit down for interviews with chat show hosts who couldn't pronounce Statham properly, well, that was a different kind of fight. See, Jason wasn't your typical Hollywood actor. He didn't come from theater school or the pages of a glossy magazine. He came from hard work, discipline, and a fair share of bruises. He never quite fit into that polished Hollywood mold. And maybe that's what made him so magnetic. He was real. He didn't fake it. He was the same guy you could see haggling over a pint at a pub one day, then flipping off a burning building the next. But even iron-willed action stars have doubts. Around the time Crank 2 came out, Jason started to feel the grind. He'd been working nonstop, physically demanding roles, endless press tours, and a barrage of expectations. His body ached, his mind buzzed, and he started questioning whether the public would ever accept him in a role that didn't involve explosions. He gave it a shot. Signed on for a couple projects that leaned more toward drama and character development. The studios were skeptical. So were the fans. One script involved him playing a small-town teacher who inspired at-risk youth through poetry. Sounds noble, right? But apparently, audiences just couldn't buy Jason Statham reciting Wordsworth. The film never got made. And if you ask Jason, he'll just shrug and say, "Wasn't meant to be, mate. I tried." But here's the kicker, he didn't let that stop him. Instead of wallowing or retreating into the shadows, Jason doubled down on what he knew best. Action. But smarter this time. He wanted control, not just of the fight scenes, but of the whole operation. So, he began collaborating more closely with directors, helping choreograph stunts, even weighing in on script structure. He wasn't just a guy punching bad guys anymore. He was shaping the very movies he starred in. Then came The Mechanic, Resurrection, and Fast and Furious 7. That's when something clicked. Audiences didn't just want Jason Statham the action hero, they wanted Jason Statham the legend. The guy who could jump out of a plane, land on a speeding car, and still have the nerve to say, "You're gonna regret that." Oh, and let's not forget his showdown with The Rock. That beef? Legendary. Off-screen, they were pals. But on-screen, it was testosterone versus testosterone, and fans lapped it up like it was the Super Bowl. Hobbs and Shaw wasn't just a movie, it was a declaration. June 4th, 2025, 11:31. Jason had cemented himself as a heavyweight, not just in martial arts, but in the action movie pantheon. And here's a bit of trivia for you. During the filming of one scene in Hobbs and Shaw, Jason refused a stunt double. The director was nervous. Insurance agents were probably sweating bullets. But Jason, ever the pro, insisted. He pulled off a leap from one moving vehicle to another with nothing but a harness and a wild glint in his eye. When asked later why he did it, he just said, "What's the point of being in an action film if you're not actually going to do the action?" I'll tell you, there's something admirable about that. A man so committed to authenticity that he'd rather risk a few cracked ribs than let someone else steal the glory. But even steel has its soft spots. And for Jason, that was Rosie. You should have seen him with her, absolutely smitten. Here's this tough guy who's knocked out more henchmen than you've had hot dinners. And yet, the way he talks about Rosie and their kids, you'd think he'd turned into a poet after all. He calls her his anchor. Says she keeps him grounded when the chaos of fame starts pulling him into orbit. They live a quiet life, all things considered. Yes, there are premieres and interviews and the occasional photo shoot, but Jason prefers his time at home, fixing things around the house, teaching Jack how to swim, and burning breakfast while Rosie laughs at him from the doorway. There's a gentleness to him that the cameras rarely catch, a softness you wouldn't expect from a man who once kicked a guy through a wall and safe. So as we continue this tale, and believe me, there's plenty more, remember that Jason Statham isn't just a star. He's a survivor, a hustler, a guy who came from nothing and turned street smarts into silver screen magic. And if that's not the American dream wrapped in a British accent, I don't know what is. You ready for part 3? It only gets better from here. Right then, let's dive back in, because trust me, the next chapter in Jason's life is where things get real juicy. See, by this point, Jason wasn't just a household name. He was the name. The kind of guy whose trailer you'd watch 3 times in a row just to see him glare at the villain, deliver one punch, and walk away like the explosion behind him was just part of the weather forecast. But fame's a funny thing. One minute it's champagne and private jets. The next it's tabloids digging through your bins looking for scandal. And Jason? He wasn't having it. See, he never cared for the spotlight when it came to his personal life. He once told a reporter, "I'm not a celebrity, I'm an actor. The rest of it's just noise." And he meant it. He and Rosie, they had a deal. Keep the family life sacred. No tabloid drama, no reality show nonsense. No look at us on vacation Instagram posts. Just love, laughter, and the occasional diaper explosion. But of course, the paparazzi didn't care about boundaries. They'd follow him down alleys, hide in bushes, even chase him through traffic. One day, after being tailed all afternoon, Jason pulled over, got out of the car, walked up to the guy with the camera, and said, dead serious, "Mate, if you don't want that lens where the sun don't shine, I'd recommend a different career." The photos mysteriously never surfaced. But it wasn't all threats and fisticuffs. No, there was a moment, A quiet, unscripted moment. That changed Jason's entire perspective. It was a charity event in LA, nothing fancy, just a fundraiser for underprivileged kids. Jason showed up, did the handshake routine, posed for photos. But then something caught his eye. A teenage boy in the corner, maybe 15, wheelchair-bound, eyes wide like saucers. The kid had a notebook in his lap, filled with sketches of Jason, scenes from movies, recreated in pencil, every detail painstakingly shaded. Jason walked over, sat down next to him, and said, "You draw these?" The boy nodded, speechless. Jason took the notebook, flipped through it carefully, page by page, then looked at him and said, "You've got a gift, kid. You ever need anything, art supplies, lessons, whatever, you call me." And he meant it. That wasn't for the cameras. Wasn't for the press release. He never told anyone. But the boy's mother sent him a letter months later, saying her son had started art school, funded anonymously. She knew who to thank. See, behind the gruff exterior, Jason Statham's got a heart bigger than his biceps. He just doesn't wear it on his sleeve. But every now and then, in those rare unguarded moments, it shines through. Now, as for his career, things only got wilder. He was doing stunts most guys half his age wouldn't even consider. Hanging off helicopters, driving cars backward down stairwells, even underwater fight scenes without a mask. When the studio asked if he wanted a body double for an underwater scene in the Meg, Jason just laughed and said, "I was a diver before I was an actor. Let me show you how it's done." And show them he did. One take. No panic. No retakes. Just pure, unfiltered Statham. But even with all that adrenaline, Jason knew time waits for no man. He started talking about legacy, not in a big ego kind of way, but in a quiet, reflective tone. He wanted to try his hand at directing, maybe even producing. Not because he wanted control, but because he wanted to help the next Jason Statham, some kid hustling on the streets, unsure if he'd ever be more than a shadow in a crowd. He started mentoring, reaching out to unknown stuntmen, up-and-coming actors, young kids from working-class backgrounds who reminded him of himself. He'd bring them on set, let them watch, sometimes even give them a line or two. He wasn't trying to be a hero. He just knew what it felt like to be overlooked. Funny thing, though, despite all the intensity, Jason's got a wicked sense of humor. Dry, deadpan, the kind of guy who could make you laugh without changing his expression. On the set of Fast and Furious 9, he pranked the crew by replacing all the prop guns in his trailer with squirt guns. Then he showed up to set and challenged Vin Diesel to a duel. Vin took one step toward him, got drenched, and the whole crew erupted. That clip never made it online, but everyone who was there still talks about it. You see, Jason Statham isn't just muscle and mayhem. He's layered. He's got depth. He's lived through hardship, found love, embraced fatherhood, and still, somehow, kept both feet on the ground. We're nearing the final stretch of his story, or at least, the chapters written so far. Because with Jason, you get the feeling he's just getting started. There's more to come. More surprises. More grit. More moments that'll make us say, "Yep, classic Statham." And in the next part, I'll tell you about the project that nearly broke him, and the one that saved him. Ready for part 4? All right, class, everyone still with me? Good, because now we're getting into the part of Jason's journey that not many know about. Sure, the blockbuster hits and badass stunts get all the headlines, but it's what happened between the movies that really tells you what kind of man he is. Now, picture this. It's 2016. Jason's fresh off Mechanic, Resurrection, the press junkets are over, and he's got a rare moment to breathe. He and Rosie are enjoying some quiet time at home. Nothing fancy, just the two of them, a bottle of wine, and their usual back and forth where she teases him about being too serious and he insists he's bloody hilarious. But Jason's not quite himself. Something's gnawing at him. The truth? He's tired. Not just physically, but the cracked ribs from his last stunt aren't exactly helping, but creatively. He's starting to feel boxed in, like every script landing on his desk is the same. Tough guy walks into a room, beats up the baddies, walks out. Rinse, repeat. So when a new script comes across his desk, different tone, different pace, he takes notice. It's not an action movie. It's a character-driven indie drama about a retired boxer dealing with the loss of his brother. No car chases, no explosions, just raw emotion and long monologues. Jason reads it in one sitting, heart-thumping. It hits him in a place he didn't know still ached. He signs on immediately. Filming begins a few months later in a quiet part of Ireland. Rainy, gray, the kind of weather that seeps into your bones. The role demands everything: grief, rage, vulnerability. And Jason? He throws himself into it. For once, he's not hiding behind fists and fireballs. He's exposed, emotionally naked. And it shakes him. Halfway through the shoot, there's a scene. Jason's character breaks down in an empty church, alone, grieving. It's a single shot, no cuts. Just Jason and his demons. The director calls action. Jason steps forward. And nothing. No tears. No voice. Just silence. He tries again. And again. Still nothing. The crew is dead quiet. Jason walks off set, sits on the steps outside the church, and just stares out into the mist. One of the producers comes over, asks if he's okay. Jason looks up and says, "I don't know if I've got it in me. Not this. Not like this." But you know what he does next? He gets up, walks back in, looks the director in the eye and says, "One more go." This time, it's magic. The tears come. The voice shakes. The pain is real. When they wrap the shot, no one says a word. The boom operator's crying. The director's got his hand over his mouth. Jason just walks out, quiet as ever, and lights a cigarette with shaking hands. The movie wraps. It hits the indie circuit. And though it doesn't make millions, it earns him something more valuable: respect. The critics call it his most powerful performance yet. People see him differently. They realize there's more to the man than bullets and bravado. But here's the twist. Just when he thinks he's about to pivot his career, the Meg 2 lands in his lap. Now, most actors would have said no. But Jason? He sees it as a challenge. How do you go from grieving ex-boxer to action hero again without losing that depth he just unlocked? So he does both. The Meg 2 becomes a bigger hit than expected, and this time, Jason brings something extra to the role. There's a weight in his eyes. A kind of unspoken history in the way he moves. Fans feel it. They don't even know why, but they do. And here's the best part. Jason starts picking and choosing his roles more carefully. No more cookie-cutter scripts. He wants to play characters that bleed, that break, that grow. Action? Sure. He'll never stop throwing punches. But now, those punches mean something. Around this time, Rosie gives birth to their second child. Jason's on set when the call comes. He drops everything, literally leaves the scene mid-shot, and hops on a private flight home. He makes it just in time. Later, he tells a friend, "There's not a single role on earth that matters more than holding your child for the first time." Now, their home is filled with baby laughter, soft lullabies, and the distant echo of Jason trying to assemble a crib while muttering, "Who the hell designed this thing?" He still trains every day. Keeps his routine tight. But these days, he also paints. Yep, paints. Oils mostly. Landscapes. Says it calms him down. Who knew, right? Jason Statham, the man who once threw a guy through a glass wall, now spends his Sundays brushing color across canvas while his daughter naps on his chest. That's the thing about him. Just when you think you've got him figured out, he shifts. And in the next part, we'll talk about his wildest role yet, the one that involved a high-stakes negotiation, a secret film set in the Alps, and a betrayal that nearly cost him everything. You ready for part 5? All right then, buckle up, because part 5 takes us into the wildest chapter yet, a behind-the-scenes tale so packed with twists, it could have been one of Jason's own scripts. And I'll warn you now, it's got tension, betrayal, icy mountains, and yes, even a goat named Maurice. Trust me, it's worth the ride. So, after the emotional arc of his indie success and the monster madness of the Meg 2, Jason was feeling unstoppable. A man reborn, creatively. And right on cue, a mysterious project landed on his desk, an untitled, ultra-secret film backed by a rogue European director with a cult following. The pitch? A gritty psychological thriller set in the Swiss Alps, all shot on location, with minimal crew, real danger, no CGI. The script came with a warning. This film will break you. Do it anyway. Now, most actors would have passed. Too cold. Too risky. Too weird. But Jason? He was hooked. The role was unlike anything he'd done before, a war vet suffering from memory loss, stranded in a snow-locked village that may or may not exist. There was no guarantee of commercial success. But the challenge? Oh, that was intoxicating. He signed on. They flew him out under complete secrecy. No press, no trailers, just a black SUV that took him up a winding mountain road to a remote village barely marked on any map. There were no phone signals. No Wi-Fi. Just snow, stone buildings, and the unsettling feeling that time didn't quite work the same up there. The director, a wiry Austrian named Alaric, greeted him wearing fingerless gloves and sunglasses, despite it being dusk. His first words? "You'll live in your character. No script. Only instincts." Jason just raised an eyebrow and said, "Sounds like a weekend at me, Nance." And thus began the most intense shoot of his career. For 6 weeks, Jason lived as the character. No trailers. No heat. The village they used? Real. The townsfolk? Not actors. He had to earn their trust, navigate their strange rituals, even survive a snowstorm that trapped the crew in the valley for days. The goat, Maurice? Jason had to share a barn with him for 3 nights during the worst blizzard. He later joked on a talk show that Goat was the best scene partner I've ever had. Knew his marks, never fluffed a line. But here's where it gets dark. Halfway through filming, the producer, an American exec named Carl, vanished. Left the mountain, never came back. Rumors started flying. Budget cuts. Creative disagreements. Some whispered that Carl had tried to change the ending without telling Alaric. Others claimed he'd fallen in love with a local woman and fled. No one really knew. Suddenly, the funding was in limbo. The crew was unpaid. Supplies ran low. And there was talk of scrapping the film entirely. Jason could have walked. He had every right. But he didn't. Instead, he pulled Alaric aside and said, "Tell me what you need. Within 48 hours, Jason had wired money from his own account to cover expenses. He bought food for the crew, arranged backup transport for emergencies, and kept morale high with impromptu stories around the fire. One night, he reenacted an entire transporter scene using only snowballs and a broomstick. The sound guy laughed so hard he chipped a tooth. They finished the film in silence. No big rap party. Just a quiet clink of mugs in a freezing kitchen and a mutual respect that didn't need words. When the film, eventually titled The Silent Hour, premiered at Cannes, it stunned critics. It was haunting. Minimalist. Raw. Jason barely spoke more than 20 lines in the whole film, but the pain in his eyes told an entire story. One reviewer called it Statham's career-defining performance, a masterclass in restraint. It didn't make box office history, but it earned him an award he'd never even dreamed of, Best Actor at the Berlin International Film Festival. When he accepted it, his speech was only 9 words long. This one's for anyone who never fit in. Now back in Hollywood, studios were falling over themselves to rebrand him. Jason Statham, the actor's actor. Suddenly, everyone wanted a piece. But Jason? He was selective. He turned down more roles than he accepted. Spent time with his kids. Fixed up an old motorcycle. Read poetry. Yes, poetry. Keats, mostly. And just when everyone thought he might ride off into the art house sunset, he shocked everyone again, signing on to the Expendables 5. When asked why, he grinned and said, "Sometimes, you just need to blow stuff up with your mates." So yeah, Jason Statham might have started as a street-hustling diver turned action star. But now, he was a legend. Not just because of what he did on screen, but because of the way he carried himself when no one was watching. And in the next chapter, we're gonna explore how he used that legend status to build something even bigger, a legacy off-screen that might just be his greatest role yet. Ready for part 6? Alright, settle in, because part 6 takes us off the big screen and into the world Jason Statham quietly built behind the scenes, a world that might just outlive his own spotlight. See, this is where the action star transforms into something even rarer in Hollywood, a legacy builder. After The Silent Hour and the surprise hit of Expendables 5, Jason had more leverage than ever. Studios lined up with blank checks. Action figures, streaming deals, franchise spin-offs, you name it, they offered it. But Jason? He did something no one expected. He walked away. Not from acting. No. He'd still throw a punch or two, still show up in the occasional gritty thriller or surprise cameo. But he wasn't interested in being the face anymore. What he wanted was something different, something that would last. So he bought land. About 200 acres just outside the Cotswolds in England. Lush, quiet, green hills. He built a house, yes, but more importantly, he built a studio. Not a glitzy, LA-style megaplex, but a sustainable, earth-toned creative space. It had rehearsal rooms, editing bays, open areas for stunt choreography, and a workshop with enough gear to make a fast and furious sequel with garden tools. He called it The Forge. Why? Because Jason believed in making things from scratch. And The Forge was exactly that, a place where young filmmakers, especially from working-class backgrounds, could come, learn, and build their own stories without needing to schmooze through Hollywood's velvet ropes. Word spread fast. A couple of his old stunt guys started teaching classes. Rosie, ever the artist herself, began mentoring aspiring costume designers and stylists. Jason? He'd show up with a cup of strong tea, sit in on pitch meetings, and offer feedback like, "Needs more heart," or, "I like the girl. Make her kick more ass." They launched a scholarship program, partnered with UK film schools, even hosted a short film festival on the grounds, complete with bonfires and barbecue. One year, a 19-year-old kid from Sheffield premiered a no-budget film he'd shot on his phone, and a month later, he was directing a segment for Netflix. But Jason wasn't chasing headlines. He rarely even let The Forge be filmed. His reasoning? It's not about me anymore. Meanwhile, back in LA, studios kept calling. One in particular, let's call them Major Studio X, wanted him for a role that sounded tailor-made. A grizzled hitman turned philosopher in a post-apocalyptic world. Think Mad Max meets The Road with a dash of kung fu. They offered him $20 million. He turned it down. Why? Because that same week, his son Jack had his first swim mate. Jason didn't miss it. Not for a paycheck. Not for a role. Not even for Quentin Tarantino. That's not to say he disappeared. He started producing behind the scenes, quietly backing indie films, especially ones by directors from marginalized communities. He gave them what he never had starting out, trust and a chance. And then, something else happened. A letter arrived at The Forge. Handwritten. From a girl named Lila in New Zealand. She was 12. Her father had passed away, and Jason's movies, especially The Transporter, had become their bonding time. She wrote, "You made my dad smile when I couldn't. Thank you." Jason read it once, then twice. Then he got on a plane. No entourage. No press. Just him. He spent an afternoon with Lila and her family. Sat on the floor, watched The Transporter with them, laughed at his own hairline, gave her one of his watches. "So you're always on time for greatness," he told her. That story never made the papers. Only reason we know it? Her uncle posted about it a year later. Jason never said a word, because that's who he is now. Still fierce, still unstoppable, but also deeply human. So yeah, Jason Statham might have started out flogging fake perfume on the streets, might have fought sharks, blown up buildings, and knocked out guys twice his size. But it's what he built outside the frame that truly defines him now. And in part 7, we'll talk about the surprising way he reconnected with his roots, and how one late-night phone call brought his story full circle. Ready to keep going? Right then, let's keep the fire going, because part 7 is where everything comes full circle, not with fanfare or fireworks, but with a quiet phone call and a return to the place where it all began. So picture this. Jason's at the forge one night, the kids are asleep, Rosie's curled up reading, and he's out in the workshop, fiddling with an old motorbike engine. It's late, windy, one of those nights where the air feels thick with something unsaid. His phone rings. Now, Jason doesn't jump for calls. Half the time he lets them go to voicemail. But something about this one, it's from an old number, no name attached, pulls at him. He wipes the grease off his hands and answers. All right, Jason. Long time. The voice is unmistakable. It's Mick, a bloke he used to know from the early days, back when Jason was still diving at Crystal Palace, selling knockoff watches out of a duffel bag, trying to keep the lights on. Mick was older, part-time coach, part-time hustler, full-time mystery. He once taught Jason how to hold his breath for over 3 minutes using nothing but cold water and sheer will. Mick tells him he's not well. Cancer. Not long left. Jason goes quiet. Then Mick says, I've got something for you. Something I should have given you years ago. A week later, Jason's back in Great Yarmouth. The streets are different now, brighter, maybe, but still holding that same coastal rust and memory in the cracks of the pavement. He hasn't walked them in years. He finds Mick in a modest flat above a fish and chip shop. The place smells like salt and oil and something sweet. Jason always remembered that about Mick's home. The man's frail now, but his eyes? Still sharp as ever. They sit, talk, laugh about the old days, about the time Jason tried to dive off the pier during a storm just to impress a girl named Danny. Spoiler, it didn't work. He ended up with a black eye and a bruised ego. Then Mick hands him a box. Inside? A VHS tape. And a letter. Your dad gave me this, Mick says. Told me to hang on to it. Said you'd need it one day. Now Jason's not the sentimental type. But this? It hits like a punch to the chest. Back at the forge, he finds a player, threads the tape, and hits play. It's old footage, grainy, wobbling, but unmistakable. There's young Jason, barely a teen, standing at the edge of a public pool. His dad, Barry, is behind the camera. You hear him laugh, cheer, shout things like, go on, son. Show him what you're made of. Jason dives. Not perfectly. Not yet. But there's something in the way he moves, focused, determined, almost fierce. He resurfaces, grinning, and his dad says, you keep going like that, Jace, you'll fly higher than any of us. He watches the whole thing twice. Then a third time. That night, Jason doesn't sleep. He just sits outside with a blanket, stars overhead, tape in hand, thinking about how far he's come and who helped him get there, even when he didn't see it at the time. The next morning, he makes a decision. He starts a new branch of the forge. This one? Not for filmmakers. For kids. Working-class kids. Swimmers. Divers. Martial artists. Anyone with a dream and nowhere to grow it. He calls it Barry House. When the press asks why the sudden expansion, he simply says, I got where I am because someone believed in me before I believed in myself. It's my turn now. Soon after, stories begin popping up. Kids from tough neighborhoods getting scholarships. Former athletes teaching again. June 4th, 2025, 11:31. A young girl from Manchester, age 13, becomes the first person in her family to leave the country to compete in a diving tournament in Paris, all thanks to Barry House. Jason doesn't put his name on it. Doesn't need to. The people who matter? They know. And here's the twist, the one you didn't see coming. The director of The Silent Hour? Alaric? He shows up a year later with an envelope. Inside it is a single-page treatment for a new film. It's called Return to Yarmouth. A semi-fictional story about a man who left his hometown behind, only to find his real purpose not in what he achieved, but in what he gave back. He wants Jason to play the lead. And Jason? He just smiles and says, let's make some bloody magic. In the next and final chapter, we'll talk about legacy, the real kind. How Jason Statham became more than an action hero, more than an actor, more than a legend. He became the man behind a movement. You ready for the grand finale? All right, folks, here we are, the final chapter. The grand finale. You followed Jason Statham from the foggy market stalls of Great Yarmouth to the explosive heights of Hollywood, through heartbreak, hard knocks, hidden depths, and a goat named Maurice. But this part? This is about what remains when the cameras stop rolling. About legacy, the kind you don't measure in awards or box office numbers, but in the people you lift along the way. It's a quiet morning in the Cotswolds. Mist hugging the hills. Jason's in the kitchen, kettle hissing, Rosie humming to herself nearby. Jack is drawing at the table. Little Isabel is chewing on a plastic dinosaur like she's preparing for a role in the Meg 3, toddler edition. The house is full of that low, golden warmth, the kind that only comes from knowing you've made peace with your past and planted something for the future. A letter arrives. Handwritten. No return address. It's from a young man named Callum. 18. He's been through hell, foster homes, school suspensions, the kind of street you don't walk at night unless you're part of it. He writes about how he was one fight away from a prison sentence when he saw the mechanic on TV. He didn't know who Jason was. Didn't know actors could look like that. Hard, quiet, no nonsense, but somehow real. You reminded me of my brother, he wrote. The one who never came back. Callum found Barry House online. Applied. Was accepted. Now, he's got a mentor, a bed, a purpose. He's learning stunt work, filmmaking, writing. He wants to tell his story. Jason reads the letter twice, eyes steady, breath slow. He folds it, slips it into a box where he keeps the most important things. Rosie's first love note. Jack's first drawing. That VHS tape of his dive. And now, Callum's letter. Later that day, Jason walks the grounds of the forge. It's grown. There are more students now. More teachers. The once quiet hills hum with life. Punches hitting pads, scripts being read aloud. Someone learning how to hold a camera steady for the first time. It's not chaos. It's creation. Jason visits the small garden they built in Mick's honor after he passed. A circle of wildflowers and smooth stones. One of them reads, "The ones who see you before the world does." He stands there a while, silent. Then a boy runs up, 10 years old, breathless, holding a handmade wooden dagger. "Mr. Statham, watch this." The kid swings the toy like it's Excalibur. Jason grins, pretends to stagger back in mock defeat. "You'll be in films in no time, mate." And in that moment, you get it. Jason Statham isn't just a man who played heroes. He became one, not because of what he did on screen, but because of what he chose to do after. He built a legacy that doesn't explode, or drive off a cliff, or fade into rolling credits. He built one that lasts. A few years from now, some rising star will take home an award, stand on a glittering stage, and say, "I wouldn't be here without Jason Statham." Not because he gave them a job, but because he gave them belief. And somewhere, maybe at the forge, maybe on set, maybe just walking those Cotswold hills, Jason will smile, scratch his beard, and say, "Not bad for a lad from Yarmouth, eh?" And that, my friends, is the story of Jason Statham. The legend, the mentor, the man who turned grit into gold and passed the torch without ever letting it go out. Class dismissed.